What's up, y'all? This is Hussein Nasser from iGeometry, where we discuss software engineering by example. In this episode, we will discuss the differences between a proxy and a reverse proxy. We will explore the benefits of both, and we'll explain what is each mean. All right. So let's start with a proxy. A proxy is generally a server that hides the identity of the client. So that's like the simplest definition of a proxy. So you are a client, you'll connect to a proxy, you'll connect to a server through a proxy. Like I want to go to google.com, but I don't want to know or for Google to know who I am as a client. So I will connect through a proxy. Typically, this is your ISP servers, right? So you connect through your Frontier proxy or whatever, and that proxy will connect you to the server, to your destination essentially. So let's go through an example here. So client one, client two, client three, like this is your mobile device, this is another laptop, and all of these guys will connect to a central proxy. All right, it will be defined in their headers essentially of each request they make. So if I want to go to Google or I want to go to a specific website, a vendor website, my traffic will be routed through that proxy, and then the proxy will make the request for me. So for example, here I'm making an HTTP request on port 80, let's say for Google, and then the proxy will make a request to the server, and so the server does not know who is the client. So that's how I usually define a proxy. If I want to define a proxy, it's like the server doesn't know who the client is, right? So that's the simplest way. So you make a request, the client make a request, but the server has no idea which client make the request, because if the server gives a response, it will give the response back to the proxy. The server only essentially know the proxy. And then the proxy knows the client obviously and maintains some sort of a table, and it will basically route the traffic back to the client who requested it. Okay, benefits of this. What's the benefits? Obviously, anonymity. Okay, server doesn't know who I am. That's actually good, right? Caching. It's a pretty cool feature. So if I am requesting a static site like my site, like a blog, HusseinNasser.com, right? And if I go through the proxy, like one client connect to the proxy and request that, the proxy needs to go to fetch static sites, things that JavaScript files that you don't usually change, right? HTML files, and then we'll fetch it from the server. That is costly. This hop, hope you can see the mouse. This hop is a bit costly, because usually the proxy sits near the client, right? So either make a request, go back, and yeah, it will keep a cache, local cache, optionally if you want to configure that. So the proxy will keep a local cache. So next client, let's say this guy not want to go to my side, it doesn't need to start pulling every single request, right? Every single file from the server. So only things that change essentially. So that's another feature. Blocking unwanted sites. A lot of ISP do it. Like in certain countries, it will want block porn sites, right, or political sites. So it defines these rules here. It's in the ISP proxy. It says, hey guys, I'm sorry, you can't access whatever, right? This site. It will say, it will return a cached version of an a 404 version. Says you can't access that, or this client can access that. But if you find a way to go to trick the proxy, hey, by the way, I'm going to this server, which is a VPN server. So the proxy says, okay, go wherever, right? So it will go to that server and then it will pull the content, but the proxy essentially, that you are kind of tracking the proxy to do that. So blocking unwanted site is a benefit. I don't know if it's a benefit for the client. It's a benefit for the ISP, or for the government essentially. Geofencing. So certain clients can only access certain servers. So you're fencing your clients. So these guys, if they're from this country or from this location, they are not supposed to watch this kind of content, right? Basically, we killed democracy. That's what we do, right? All right. So yeah. All right, that's a proxy. Let's go to the reverse proxy. A reverse proxy is is essentially that's what it is. It's a reverse proxy. I always get confused between the two, but that's the best way out now. So a proxy, the server doesn't know who the client, the way I understand it, right? The reverse proxy, the client doesn't know which server it is connecting to. That's how I understand it. So in the proxy, the server doesn't know which client it is connecting from. But in the reverse proxy, it's the other way around. The client have no idea which server is connecting to, right? So I would connect a client to connect a reverse proxy through port 80, and the reverse proxy will do some magic. Will say, okay, you want to connect to this server or this service, let's say, right? This application. You deployed an application essentially, or let's say this is Google even. Google has its own reverse proxy. So you'd connect to this reverse proxy, which is essentially google.com. And then google.com, which is the IP address of the reverse proxy, will say, this server is free, this server is not. Let me reverse you to this server. And this is like a completely internal thing. You will be completely agnostic of the whole thing. So you will connect to a service, to the proxy, and the reverse proxy. And then this reverse proxy will connect you even to another port. You don't really care because this is an internal traffic. This could be unsecured for all we care, right? Could be like a completely proxied to this server, and then the server returns the result to the reverse proxy, and then to the client. So you can see the benefits of this, right? Right off the bat. If let's not talk about Google at all. Let's talk about your application. It's like this is a very common pattern. So I build an application and I will deploy it on port 8080 on my internal network, and I just copy the application and paste it to another machine with the different IP address. Copy and paste to another machine. Now all my clients connect to this reverse proxy and says this reverse proxy will act like a load balancer. Says, okay, do a round robin around those. So a round robin algorithm is basically 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. We just like loop through them. So any client that connects has no idea what's the server that is behind that reverse proxy. All right. So that's actually the difference. Load balancing, that's the first feature. Again, caching. Caching is a cool feature here. So I can cache content that doesn't really change. If I'm making the same request again, as long as the request is not idempotent. So that request, if it doesn't change, I can cache it. That could be dangerous, right? Caching, you have to do it in a very smart way to avoid stale cache. But yeah, caching nonetheless. Isolating internet traffic, that's one of the best features, because I can, for all I care, I can run all my stuff in a completely internal DMZ zone, like a demilitarized zone. It's like nobody knows about it. I can configure this machine to run on containers, virtual machines, actual physical machine. Nobody cares, right? Because it's all internal, and I can run it on this port, this port, this port. I do not need to expose this port to the whole world. This is completely blocked to the entire world. Nobody can access this. Only obviously the reverse proxy. So it's like from this side to this side, this guy will access the client essentially, port 80. But this is like completely, this could be like unsecured. This should be properly HTTPS, not HTTP. This is like another option. So you can add like a HTTPS on 443, obviously. So yeah, you can basically make that secure, and you don't have to secure the internal. If you can, if you want to do it, this is unnecessary. Logging, yeah. I want to know which server went down, which server is going up, and all these things. You can log it here, so you can go to the reverse proxy and query this information. And finally, this is a very cool feature, which is canary deployment in reverse proxy, where recently, I don't know if you guys know, YouTube had been doing some experiments for 3% of the viewers will get auto-generated thumbnail. So how did they do that? This is how they do it basically. It says like for each request, I want this version of the server will have a slightly different version. This version of the application will have slightly different version. Still running on port 8080, but it will be slightly different version. We won't break the APIs. Still, the calls are the same. Everything is the same, but the content changes. So if you are one of those 3% client that called, you will be reverted to this special server, right? Let me change the color. Yeah, you can change. You can be reverted to this special server, which will give you different result than the rest. Like Instagram do it all the time with new features. They want to experiment new features, but they don't want to experiment with the whole public, right? So they want to test it out. So it's okay. If people who hit the server, they experiment. Like the example, they didn't fail, they didn't crash, all of that thing. So yeah, hopefully it wasn't a long video, guys. Hopefully this was useful. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. There is a lot of content of software engineering stuff. I'm gonna see you in the next one. Have a great day.